When I was little, I think there was a foreshadowing of my current career there in those early days, because when I looked at a car and I could see it moving, I questioned, well, how can that be? And I concluded by observing the evidence that there was smoke coming out of the pipe at the back, the exhaust, and that therefore that must be propelling the car forward. And so in my, what would it have been, 5-6-year-old mind, I had concluded that the car is moving because it is propelled by sort of a jet propulsion out of the exhaust, and I better not stand behind the car because I might get roasted or pushed away by the exhaust. Now, that's an interesting theory I had, and I had evidence for it. Then later, when I was at university, well, it was explained to me that this is an internal, it was maybe a bit late, but it was in life, an internal combustion engine which burns the fuel that's in it, increasing the heat, just simply speaking, raising the heat in a cylinder, expanding the air in there, and therefore pushing a rod up and down to eventually turn the wheels. And there is another theory, and of course at university then I was given an engine to take apart and experiment on, and I could see that that was actually the correct theory. So life is full of these things that we can observe and we can form theories on, but there are many theories that are incorrect, and there are far fewer theories which are correct. Now, when we find the theory for whatever it is that is correct, we can repeat it many times. So every time you pull a internal combustion engine apart and put it back together correctly, it will work. And every single car that you go to and you open the bonnet, you'll find one in there. Okay, so do you see what I'm trying to say? That the correct theories for what we observe in the end are repeatable and are actually much easier to explain than the ones which are incorrect. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the simple truth behind the origin of the species, because the debate has become very, very muddled. What we have is one side saying that the earth was created by God, an intelligent designer, and another side which says that the earth just came into being. One of those theories is incredibly simple, easy to understand, and when we test it we find that it is correct time and time again with what we observe, and the other one, which I won't be covering, I think you will find less so. So we're going to look at the simple fact of life, as in where did it come from. And we find this: no life has ever come from a non-living source. Secondly, life must always be passed on from another life. And we observe that in the natural world without exception. So hopefully you agree, wherever you find little bunnies, there must be big bunnies. And it's as simple as that, isn't it? Wherever we find a living organism, whether it's under the microscope or whether it's the largest tree or plant or animal, there must have been other life which passed on life to it. And we observe this without exception. There aren't any exceptions in the natural world. So our observation leads us to believe that first life on earth must have emanated from another life, because otherwise all our observations would lead us in a separate direction. So what was that first life giver? And the simple answer is God. And that's why those who believe in creation believe in God, and that's why those who accept the Christian gospel believe in God. And as you can see, it's logical with what we see in the natural world. So what point did simple logical reasoning leave us? Because the simple answer, God, seems to tick all the boxes. It seems to be consistent with what we see around about us. Surely, just like when I was 10 or 15 or 18 when I was at university, put away the theories which were incorrect because they didn't tally with what I saw in the world around me. Surely, by now, people ought to have put aside the idea of evolution and stuck with this simple and I believe correct answer of God the Creator. Well, of course, human nature says, well, if I believe in God, I'd have to answer to him. I might have to do what he says. And so if we go from a simple answer to a reaction, I don't like having to answer to God, the only result is that we have to have another answer instead of God. And I believe that's what's happened, and that's why we are here with evolution. We've had 6,000 years of alternative answers to God, and unfortunately the situation at the moment is that at an early age we're preached to. At school, on the television, on the internet, whatever we read, children's books, we are preached to about the theory of evolution. And I think it's quite nicely summed up here in this cartoon. Hopefully you all get it. So let's explore the simple answer. God said, "Let the earth bring forth a living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, beasts of the earth after his kind," and it was so. So God passed on life from life because God said, and it was done, it was created. And it says elsewhere in Genesis, in the creation of Adam, that God breathed life into him. God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed." So life in turn passes on life. That's what seed is all about. And it's always the same kind. So the simple fact of life is, just to recap, no life has ever come from a non-living source, and life must always be passed on from another life. We observe this in the natural world without exception, and we observe it in the scripture without exception, right from the first page. No life has ever come from a dissimilar source, and life must always be passed on from the same species, as it said in that passage in Genesis we just read. Again, without exception. Species is defined as this. And so, if we observe these rules and we observe the world around us, we are not able to see any kind of convergence of the species. That is a coming together of the features and the attributes of one species, and the eventual sort of domination of the species by one species that has all the best attributes in it. There's no natural selection of the best design if we are to stick with what we observe and what we read in the Bible. There's no divergence of the species. no half-species hybrids or best compromises. And in our perception, which we will just have a look at in a minute, this statement is true and these do not occur. Now the Bible emphasises the simple answer over and over from the very first page. Genesis 1:25. After his kind. After their kind. After his kind. Reproduction is always done after its kind. And if we accept this simplicity spoken of in the Bible and accept that God must have started all this off, and we come with the different reaction that I'm willing to accept it, then I can guarantee that life and the world around us starts making more sense. Just as a young boy, I would have been very foolish to go to university and try and persuade everyone on my mechanical engineering course that cars propelled themselves by the fumes that came out of the back. It would have made my life very difficult. So life becomes very difficult when one tries to explain creation or explain the origin of the species in a different way. And that's possibly why the theories of evolution have become so complicated. Let's look at it some more. In school they teach that evolution results in the survival of the fittest. So we would have to conclude that there aren't any unnecessary elements of design to be present in the creation we see around us. Okay, if the survival of the fittest is correct, then we shouldn't be able to see unnecessary colour, texture, patterns or shape and size in the creation that we see around us. It should be utilitarian. So if we can get this working, we're going to have a quick look at a video of the natural world. These are photos taken within a 6-mile radius of a village in Holland. So we spent over a minute and a half looking at what? Sorry? Fungus. Yeah, wasn't it fun? But so I deliberately chose something that was, boring. It was the lowest of the low. And yet, these were all separate species, I believe. There may have been one or two duplicates there. All it is fungus. All it is growing out of dead matter on the forest floor. And we had amazing patterns and colour and shapes, different sizes. So we did have unnecessary colour, texture, patterns, shape and size. And it's all there reflected in Genesis. We don't have to scratch around for meaning in what we see in the natural world. It's recorded for us. God created the world and everything in it in this way. The earth brought forth grass, the herb yielding seed after its kind, the tree yielding fruit, whose seed is in itself, after his kind, and God saw it was good. So one of the reasons God did it this way is because he wanted it to be good. And he wanted us to see and recognise that this was a good creation. And he made every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. And there's an incredible amount of the natural world that exists simply by eating fungus. And so God has design criteria that we know about because of Scripture, and we can see it reflected in the world all around us. Every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. And the reason is that we know he is the designer of it. He left not himself without witness, in that he did good, gave us rain from heaven and fruitful seasons, filling our hearts with food and gladness. I don't know if you do enjoy the odd woodland walk, but seeing the flowers and little creatures and smelling the fragrances, it really is wonderful, isn't it? So in school we're taught that evolution results in the survival of the fittest. Therefore we ought to conclude that there should be no unnecessary elements of design present, but that's not what we see, and that's therefore not what we can conclude. And we ought also to conclude that the species will tend towards a few best solutions. But as you can see, where fungus is concerned, there wasn't just one type of fungus so that the animals could eat it. There were many different kinds, and there were many so-called superfluous elements there. So we're going to look at something else. We're going to specifically look at how God solved the problem of plants and trees passing on their life to create further life. So if God designed the world, what we're going to see is instead of one solution to this problem, we're going to see many solutions, and we're going to see that all these solutions work in themselves and are not in any way tending towards a one or a few best solutions. So this is just to wake you up and have you calling out, please, if you don't mind. Who can see here? What we're going to do is look at the variety, beauty. These are the design criteria that I just listed. So we're going to look at the way in which seeds fulfill those criteria so that all can benefit. So I'm getting ahead of myself. Right. Who can tell me where the seed are here and how they're spread? In the skin, yeah, of the strawberry. And this is one we sometimes have take a part in. Being eaten, then what happens? Bird poo, yeah, or other poo. And so it's covered in nutritious manure. Isn't that an amazing design solution? That first of all it smells and looks wonderful, and it's tasty, so that we desire it, or birds or animals want to eat it. And that's a solution to the problem of how does this plant spread its seed far and wide. And when it comes out the other end, it's wrapped in this nutritious manure for it to be able to start growing straight away in the best kind of soil. Yeah, close up of the seeds. What about that one? Melon. This time the seeds are inside. And so it's got to be eaten for those seeds to be spread around. And I think possibly the difference here is I don't know what it's called, but the jelly-like substance around here, which helps it go through so quickly. Like that one. Yeah. Blown on the wind. I think that's a broom tree. Yeah, propelled out. Well done. Does anyone know how it happens? These are seed pods. They start off like little green, bit like runner beans really, but about this big.
Just twist as they dry out and then kind of...
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so Mark's going like this. They just, yeah, exactly. So it dries, and built in within this pod is a tension, so that when it dries it starts twisting. It wants to twist but it can't. So on whatever summer's day, it reaches a point where suddenly it cracks along the fault lines, like it's as if it's been scored ready. and as it cracks it twists and it flings the little seeds around. Probably won't know this one. Popping what? Sir?
It's a poppy.
Poppy? No. I think it's. Don't think you see it in this country. It's basically like a cucumber. Inside, in more and more water, moisture stretches and stretches until one day something opens up here. And it just fires all its seeds out into the air, several metres into the air. So, propulsion.
What was that?
I did used to know, but I've forgotten. It's something cucumber. Yeah. Yeah, we can have a competition to name it afterwards. About this one. Yeah. And incidentally, a lot of design that we find of products in the market are based on what scientists or engineers see in creation. So close up, you can see these hooks, and I think Velcro is based on this. And that's under a microscope. And you see how all these things are not just a little bit different, they're completely different ways of solving the same problem. Right, this is a poppy. Right, stem dries and becomes springy. The lid breaks and rolls back, as you can see there, and the seeds harden and become detached, so they're loose inside. So if you if you see a poppy and shake it, you can hear them. But it can't come. The seeds can't come out because it's a bowl shape. So it's that's the stem down here, but it's obviously upright. Until a very windy day or something brushes past, the stem bends over, and there's the stress induced the violent movement, and it springs back and throws the seed. So catapult. Now that one. Yeah, Concord horse chestnut. Now, did you know that the stem, wherever it is, somewhere over here, shrivels up and breaks just when the fruit's ripe? When it hits the floor, the spikes hold the shell in place, which is the green bit. And you can see the fault lines here. Again, it's like someone's been along and scored it, ready for it to break open. And that only opens on impact, but this bit stays put because of the spikes. The white bit is a cushion, absorbs the impact and propels the hard bit, the conker, out. And the smooth lubricated surface helps it be ejected, and the round shape helps it roll. So how many steps have gone into that design? And if I was designing it, I think I'd be hard pushed to come up with something as wonderful as that. Okay, we'll press on. I'm going to hammer this home. There's fruit treats, digestion, distribution, flinging, shaking through the wind, animal movement. There's dropping and rolling, there's floating, there's flying, gliding, helicopter seeds, parachute seeds, there's animal carriers by sticking to the fur, Velcro hooks, spikes. There's animals that take the nuts and things and bury them. There's explosion, pressure jet, catapult, trampoline. All solutions work. There's no convergence, no merging, no natural selection. The entire design brief is fulfilled. This is our observation without exception in the natural world. So, God demonstrates His glory. And really it comes down to, do we want to give God the glory for what He has designed and created, or do we want to give that glory to chance? Do we want to be honest with ourselves and take what we see in the world around us and be consistent with it, give God the glory, or do we not? For He spoke and it was done, it was created. So there's some further resources there of other places where you can look for some of the things I've covered, but most of all, our own explanation of nature where we live will yield us the answers. Thank you.